This is the Sabbath School lesson for the first quarter, 2022.
Welcome to Lesson 5, Jesus, the Giver of Rest, ready for teaching on January 29. It's from the series In These Last Days, The Message of Hebrews, authored by Dr. Felix Cortes, Associate Professor of New Testament Literature in the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary at Andrews University. And I'm your reader for today, Dr. Percy Harold. Wednesday, January 26. Entering into His Rest. Read Hebrews chapter 3, verse 11, and Hebrews chapter 4, verses 1, 3, 5, and 10. How does God characterize the rest he invites us to enter? Hebrews 3, verse 11, So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. And Hebrews 4, verse 1, Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to come short of it. And verse 3, For we who have believed do enter that rest, as he has said, So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. And verse 5, And again in this place, they shall not enter my rest. And verse 10, For he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his works, as God did from his. Both the Sabbath commandment in Exodus 20 verses 8 to 11 and Moses' restatement of it in Deuteronomy 5:12 to 15 invite us to remember what God has done for us. As we have seen, what God wrote on tablets of stone point us to the finishing of his work of creation. In Exodus 31, verse 18, we read, And when he had made an end of speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. And Exodus 34, verse 28, So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. In Deuteronomy, Israel is commanded to keep the Sabbath in view of God's finished work of deliverance from Egyptian bondage. The exodus from Egypt pointed forward to the ultimate work of deliverance from sin that Christ would accomplish on the cross when he said, It is finished, in John 19:30. So, the Sabbath is doubly blessed and, in fact, is especially meaningful for Christians. Read Hebrews chapter 4, verses 9 to 11 and verse 16. What are we called to do? Hebrews 4, beginning at verse 9. There remains therefore a rest for the people of God, for he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his works as God did from his. Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest, lest anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience. And then verse 16. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. The Sabbath rest celebrates the fact that God ended or finished his work of creation, as we read in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. Let's read that. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished, and on the seventh day God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. And Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 to 11. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. Or redemption, as we read in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 to 15. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of the cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Similarly, Jesus' enthronement in the heavenly temple celebrates that he finished offering a perfect sacrifice for our salvation. Hebrews 10:12-14. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down at the right hand of God, from that time waiting till his enemies are made his footstool. For by one offering he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. Notice that God rests only when he has secured our well-being. At creation, God rested when he had finished the creation of the world. Later on, God rested in the temple only after the conquest of the land he had promised Abraham was completed through the victories of David. And Israel lived in safety, as we read in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 21-25. So Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river to the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Now Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cors of fine flour, 60 cors of meal, 10 fatted oxen, 20 oxen from the pastures, and 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted fowl. For he had dominion over all the region on this side of the river, from Tiphsah even to Gaza, namely over all the kings on this side of the river, and he had peace on every side all around him. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, each man under his vine and his fig tree, from Dan as far as Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. And we'll compare that with Exodus 15, verses 18-21. The Lord shall reign for ever and ever. For the horses of Pharaoh went with his chariots and his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought back the waters of the sea upon them. But the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. Then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took the timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. And Deuteronomy 11:24, Every place on which the sole of your foot treads shall be yours, from the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even to the western sea shall be your territory. And 2 Samuel chapter 8, verses 1-14. After this it came to pass that David attacked the Philistines and subdued them. And David took Metheg Ammah from the hand of the Philistines. Then he defeated Moab, forcing them down to the ground. He measured them off with a line. With 2 lines he measured off those to be put to death, and with 1 full line those to be kept alive. So the Moabites became David's servants and brought tribute. David also defeated Hadazedah, the son of Rehob, the king of Zobah, and he went to recover his territory at the river Euphrates. David took with him 1,000 chariots, 700 horsemen, and 20,000 foot soldiers. Also, David hamstrung all the chariot horses, except that he spared enough of them for 100 chariots. When the Syrians of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David killed 22,000 of the Syrians. Then David put garrisons in Syria of Damascus, and the Syrians became David's servants and brought tribute. So the Lord preserved David wherever he went. And David took the shields of gold that had belonged to the servants of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. Also from Betah and from Berothai, cities of Hadadezer, King David took a large amount of bronze. When Toi, king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated all the armies of Hadadezer, then Toi sent Joram his son to King David to greet him and bless him, because he had fought against Hadadezer and defeated him. For Hadadezer had been at war with Toi, and Joram brought with him articles of silver, articles of gold, and articles of bronze. King David also dedicated these to the Lord, along with the silver and gold that he had dedicated from all the nations which he had subdued, from Syria, from Moab, from the people of Ammon, from the Philistines, from Amalek, and from the spoil of Hadadezer the son of Rehob, king of Zobah. And David made himself a name when he returned from killing 18,000 Syrians in the Valley of Salt. He also put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom he put garrisons, and all the Edomites became David's servants. And the Lord preserved David wherever he went. God had a house built for himself only after Israel and the king had houses for themselves. And so to finish the day, how can we enter into his rest even now? That is, how can we, by faith, rest in the assurance of the salvation that we have in Christ, and not in ourselves? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.